Hi everyone, welcome to Edible Canopy for beginners, food forest tips and tricks on how to get the fruits that you want started in your garden. And my name is Sandra, and I would like to talk to you about that today. I'm going to talk to you specifically about bananas. So you can see this is my banana patch here / garden. I started with 2 banana plants less than 2 years ago. So it's been between a year and a year and a half that I planted the first 2 plants that I got. I went to a nursery, picked them out, had no idea that there are actually thousands of varieties of bananas. So try to get yourself familiar with what the different varieties are. Some popular ones to start you off with would be the Java banana. It's also called an ice cream banana. It's got a sweeter taste to it, very popular. There is the ladyfinger, which I have, and it's got the smaller bananas, sweet as well. There's also Cavendish, and I have those here as well. And those are the typical bananas that you're gonna see in the grocery store or the farmer's market. More than likely you've had them before in your past, and those are a good variety as well. There's also a red banana. Not so sure about that one myself, but those are kind of the top bananas that people are purchasing and liking and loving in their yard. So it's really up to you what type of banana plant, tree that you prefer. You'll have to decide that, what works best for you. When you're buying a banana plant, you also want to make sure that that particular plant is good for the zone that you're in. And as I mentioned, I'm in zone 9B. So I know that these varieties should prosper well where I'm at, as long as I do the right things to maintain them. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today as well, is all that encompasses taking care of these plants. You also want to think about, are you going to be able to put those plants in a pot because your yard's not big enough to put them in the ground? Maybe you just don't want them in the ground. Or are you actually going to put them in the ground? I would recommend, if you can put them in the ground, that's the best way they're going to thrive for you. However, I know people that put them in a pot. If you are going to put them in a pot, I would suggest you go with a dwarf version because they don't get as tall. The dwarf version could go anywhere from 8 to 10 feet tall. That means it's going to have roots that are going to be pretty large to go with it, and you're going to need to have a pot that's big enough for those particular roots. If you go with the regular size, they can get over 20 feet tall. So it's not going to be substantially good for that plant to be in a pot if it's going to get 20 feet tall. The other thing that you might want to think about when you purchase is, where are you going to put this plant when you do put it in the yard? What's going to work for you? For me, plants like this, the bananas, thrive together because I want to be able to mulch and water them together, and they're heavy feeders. I put them all together. Now keep in mind, when you do plant them, you want them to be 6 to 10 feet apart. Now, I did not do that on all of mine, so don't do what I did. Make sure you plant them apart far enough, because you can see how this is all kind of growing together. It's a lot. So keep that in mind. Plus, the other thing you need to keep in mind is that banana plants love sun. So you want to make sure they get 6 to 8 hours of sun. 9B can be a little harsh. So what I did was I actually planted them where I have some shade in the late afternoon. And so that's where you can see I have a pole barn here. I didn't plant them close enough. Keep this in mind when you do plant next to any type of building, that it's not close enough to radiate so much heat off of that building that stresses even more heat on the plant. So again, keep in mind that 6 to 10 feet apart rule from a building, from other plants, and from each other banana plants. That's super important for you to have success with these. When I planted the banana plants, and again, you can purchase different size varieties. I mean, some of the nurseries have 5-gallon plants for you to buy. Some have 10-gallon plants. It just depends on what you prefer. When you go to dig the hole for that plant, you want to make sure that it's wide enough for the actual plant to go into. So I look at the pot itself, and I look at that pot and I say, okay, I'm going to make sure my hole is 3 to 4 inches wider than the pot that this plant is in. So make sure you know that. And then when you plant it, I always try to plant, and I'll show you, if my roots are here, I plant at least an inch below this soil line so that the roots aren't sticking out, but it's low enough, but not too deep. I also make sure I have on hand potting soil. Manure is super important. Or maybe you have like a mushroom mix as well. Just something that has a lot of nutrients to start your plant off well in. Once the plant goes, well, before the plant goes in, I water that hole that I dug pretty substantially, and I give it time for all the water to soak into that soil. Then I put the plant in, then I put in my mix of potting soil or compost or manure into the hole, and make sure when you do, you pack around that open space. Kind of stand on it very gently or push down really good. You want to make sure you get out all the air bubbles that could potentially be left in that soil. And the reason you don't want there to be air bubbles, because then the roots don't really thrive with a lot of air bubbles in that soil. So make sure you pat it down well. The next thing I did was I purchased bags of mulch. I would not recommend mulch that has dye in it, like that super black mulch or the super red mulch. Just do a natural mulch at your nursery. Buy that if you don't have compost already ready or a bunch of grass clippings already hanging around your house. What I did was, you can see here that this is all mulch. And by now, all of this is about 2 to 3 inches deep. So that's super important because they're heavy feeders and they love water and they love sunlight. So make sure that you use a pretty good substantial amount of mulch. And it also, the mulch acts as a moisture barrier. So on those times where there's a lot of sun, especially in 9B, July and August are pretty brutal, it'll help hold in some moisture for your banana plants. So really keep that in mind. So now that you have them planted, you're gonna have to maintain them. When I talk about water, I was out here every day in July and August. Well, I'm out here every day anyways, but especially when it's like a drought kind of, you're not getting that afternoon rain all the time. And again, that's seasonal. Every year it's a little different. But on the years where there's not rain every afternoon, you're going to need to come out and you're going to have to water these. Whether you set up a really good sprinkler system, make sure it doesn't hit them directly, or you actually deep hose water them is super important. What I do is, depending on how they look, and they'll let you know if they're not getting enough water. They get kind of droopy brown. That's the first indicator something's wrong. I take the hose and I actually put the hose right down in the soil here and let it sit for a minute. I hold it maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and I do that for every banana plant. I can also keep the hose in the open areas here because their roots can grow horizontally and they grow deep, which is great because if I water in the center, they're all going to get water. Doesn't have to be all individually at certain points. Keep in mind, however, if you have new ones, you have to be particularly careful and water them quite a bit. As long as they're not in standing soaking water, the bananas love water, so it's okay to keep watering them. Keep that in mind. Now, the other thing I look at is, as the banana just grows and matures, the actual leaves on it will come off like this. You'll see them. So in the summer, if they hang over, I will clip them. You can see I clipped this one. I'll clip them and just throw them down here in the mulch and let them be a part of the whole ecosystem. If it's the winter time, which in 9B we don't have a huge winter. I lived in 5A, so I know there's no real winter here, but they're subtropical plants, so they love the heat, the humidity, the water. I will leave them on so that acts like an insulation for them. I think that's really important, so I'll kind of show you. Let me walk back here so you can see. This is one that if it was the winter time, then I would just leave it, but it's not the winter time, so I'm gonna take it off at some point. I like to clean it up so I can tell what's growing and what is not growing. This guy here was one of my first banana plants, and you can see how beautiful he is. What happens too as they start to grow and mature, they have puppies, so we call them pups. So that's why I've grown to over 24 banana plants now, is because I propagate them, or we call separate them from the mama plant, and I'll show you that in a separate video how to do that. It's kind of an art too. Like, first couple times I did it, there might have been ones I didn't say because I didn't do it properly, and that's okay. It's trial and error because they do spring up pups pretty quickly. So if you don't do it right the first time, try it again. And again, I'll show you that in another video. But you can see here that I have 2 pups I've let grow. This one here and this one. And now there's another one coming up. I'm gonna let this one get just to probably up to here, and then I'm gonna take this one off. So again, that'll be in my video. I'll show you how to do that, because when you take them off, you wanna make sure you get some root with it, because if you don't get root with it, it's not gonna survive. It's gonna die. And I also take these little guys. They're too small, for my opinion, to be out here, especially in June and July. They just dry up so fast. So I put them in pots to start, let them get probably about 12 more inches higher, and then I plant them out here with the other bananas. Keep that in mind when you're doing your banana setup. So now for the exciting part. I want to show you what you wait for, because you want bananas. Is I have my first one that I got at the nursery, and this is my ladyfinger. She has fruit. She's not ready yet, but I want to show you. So this is how it starts, like this. And you can tell that the bananas are here. And so as the flower opens, it reveals bananas. And this one has flowers here, but I don't see the bananas, so I need to see what's going on with that. But here's the bananas that I have so far on this particular banana tree. And so you can see as it opens, this falls off and reveals the bananas. So you've got to know when to take this off. This is not time. It's usually from the time you get the flower to the time that these are ready to harvest is about 115 days, maybe longer. It just depends on how it looks. So you have to check that pretty regularly to make sure you don't miss the opportunity to get them before something else does. And you also want to make sure that you're getting enough water in here and nutrients as the banana plant continues to grow. I also, as far as fertilizer, I use chicken manure quite a bit. I'll actually come and just dump it in here. I'll use crushed eggshells in here for the calcium. And then I will from time to time do store-bought fertilizer, and it's ones like 8-10-8, or there's one called Grow More That's for bananas. That's phenomenal. And if you don't know what they stand for, the first number is the nitrogen content of that fertilizer. The second number is the phosphorus that's in it. And then the third number is potassium. So each type of tree, now this is a plant, but each type of tree that you decide to grow has different requirements, like what works best for them and how they grow, like citrus versus fruit bearing versus a palm tree. So really keep that in mind when you're picking a fertilizer for your particular bananas, or when we go into other videos, I'll explain to you about the other fertilizers for those fruit trees. So I hope that helps. I feel like I covered quite a bit. Just again, recapping, decide what banana plant you want for your taste, what your space size is for your taste. If you put yours in a pot, just to recap, don't put rock on top. Please just put mulch. You want to make sure your banana tree is getting enough water, and you want to make sure it's getting enough sunlight and enough nutrients. So hopefully, as a beginner, you find this video very helpful. So if you don't mind, if you could like and subscribe, I would surely appreciate it. If you have any comments, please put them in the script below, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.